Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Dev Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parbrahm Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Om Dhyanamoolam Guru Murti Pujamulam Guru Padam Mantramulam Guru Vakya Mokshamulam Guru Kripa Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shivam friends, today we will be taking a reading of chapter 23 of third book on creation, and this chapter is about the battle the armies engaged. Ram said, Sage, describe this warfare to me as I love stories of this kind. Vasishtha said, the ladies, in order to have a better view of the battle below, ascended in their imaginary aerial cars to a more retired spot in the higher regions of the sky. At this time, the two armies clashed and mingled, fighting each other with shouts like waves dashing against one another in a raging sea. Vidurath, the lord of Ram, formerly Padma, the husband of Leela, impatient, seeing a bold warrior from the other army attack one of his soldiers, used his huge mallet to strike him on the breast. Then the battle raged with the impetuosity of rolling waves in a stormy ocean. Armies on both sides flamed with living fire and flashes of fiery lightning. Now the edges of waving swords glittered in the sky, cracking and clashing noises filled the air with a hideous crackling. Then flew, then flew winged arrows overshadowing sunbeams and emitting a booming noise that hid the rattling clamor of summer clouds. Armor clashed against armor with a clanking noise, shooting sparks of glistening fire. Arms hacking and slashing against arms filled the air with their fragments, flying like birds in the air. The shaking arms and legs of the two armies appeared like a forest moving on the land. The twang of their bows and the rumbling of discs, crackling like the rattling drive of wheels in heaven, drove away the birds of the air. The hissing of their loosened strings resembled the bee-like buzzing heard in samadhi. Iron sharp ears the heads of the shoulders like sleets of hailstones, and the crashing of armor broke arms of the mail-clad warriors. Weapons struck brazen armor with a howling noise and clanking sound. Strokes flying like drips of rainwater dented the face of the air on all sides. Steel striking steel made hands ring with a jingling sound, and the continued rapping on arms and clapping of hands raised chat chat and pat pat sounds. The whizzing noise as swords were unsheathed was like the hissing of sparks from fire. The sounds of arrows and darts flying in all directions were like the rustling of falling leaves in autumn. The field was filled with blood spouting from throats, separated from bodies, mangled limbs and heads and broken swords. The flame of fire flaring from armor emblazoned the hairs of warriors. The sound of weapons as swordsmen fought and fell raised a giddy and loud jingling. Tall elephants, pierced by spears, poured out torrents of red-hot blood while their kin gored bodies with shrill cries, others crushed by the ponderous maces of their antagonists, shrieked grievously under the blows, while heads of slain soldiers swam in rivers of blood over the plain. Here, hungry vultures were pouncing from above, and there the sky was covered by a cloud of dust. Weaponless soldiers fought with their hands, pulling each other down by a hair. The battle as seen by onlookers, this is chapter 34. The generals and ministers of the warring sides and the aerial spectators of the battles were talking among themselves this way. See, here the ground has become a lake of blood with heads of slaughtered hosts floating like lotuses upon it, and there the air has become like the starry heaven, glittering with broken weapons flying like birds in the sky. Behold, the air is red with the particles of bright red blood borne above by the winds. It is midday, but the sky presents evening clouds with the glow of the setting sun. What are these, says one, that are flying like straws in the sky? They are, says the other, no stars, but the flight of arrows that had filled the air. Another cries that as long as the dust of the air is wet with the blood of the brave, heroes are entitled to glory and have their home in heaven for myriads of years. A scripture says to fear not these dark swords, whose blades are worn by the brave like petals of blue lotuses above their breasts, and the brave are favorites in the eyes of the goddess of fortune. The heavenly Apsara nymphs that saw the fighting and felt a desire to embrace the brave, the god of the flowery bow, was busy loosening their waistbands. They beckoned their welcome by waving their reddened palms, by shaking red leaves on trees, by the round glances of their eyes in the blooming blossoms of plants, and by the perfume of their breath in the honey fragrance of flowers. The guardian spirits of the pleasure gardens of paradise sang sweet notes with the woodland choir and danced in the wagging tails of peacocks. As a brave warrior broke the enemy line with his hardy axe, his beloved was breaking his hard heart and spirit with the soft glances of her eyes. It is by my lance, says the lancer, that I have severed the head of my enemy with rings in his ears, like the head of the ascending node of Rahu approaching the disk of the sun. Look, there is a champion hurling blocks of stone attached to the end of a chain reaching his feet. There is another whirling his wonderful log of wood held in his uplifted arm. There comes that warrior in the form of Yam, the god of the underworld, appearing from the region of the dead spirits and spreading a horrid devastation all around. Come, let us go back the way we came. Look at these ravenous birds greedily plunging their long necks into the flesh of bodies just separated from their heads and glutting themselves with the gushing blood. See there the headless trunk of the slain moving to and fro in the field of battle. The eloquent among the spectators were talking to one another about the frailty of human life and the uncertainty of the time of their meeting in the next world. Oh, the stunned cannibal of death, says one, that devours entire bodies of armies in one swoop, now weltering in blood, and levels the leveling horse to the ground. The showers of arrows falling on the elephants resemble the showers of raindrops on mountain tops. The darts sticking to their front bones are like bolts of lightning, lightning piercing the cliff tops, while a headless body was groveling on the ground for the lack of its head. Its head was flying on high like a bird of air, proclaiming its immortality in heaven. The army, harassed by the stones slung at their heads, tried to entrap the enemy in the snares set at their feet. Wives that had become Apsaras after death were now eager to claim their husbands, restored to their youth by virtue of falling in the field of battle. The glaring light of the line of lances that had reached the sky seemed like the flight of stairs, all golden stars for the ascent of the brave to the gates of heaven. The wife of the slain soldier, now a heavenly goddess, taking possession of her husband's fair godlike breast, was looking about in search of another. Generals, arms waving, wailed loudly over their fallen armies in the field. They appeared like cliffs of rocks, resounding to the clamorous surges of the sea below. They shouted at warriors to fight their best. They cried out to remove the wounded to the rear and not trample the bodies of their own soldiers now lying low on the ground. Look, their apsaras are eagerly tying their loosened hair and advancing with sobbing bosoms to receive the departed warriors, joining their company in their celestial forms. Ah, receive our guests from afar, says one on the banks of the rivers of paradise, decorated with golden lotus blossoms, and entertain them with fresh water and cooling breeze. Look, there are groups of weapons broken into the pieces like bones by their impact, huddled in the air with a jingling sound and shining like stars in the sky. See the stream of diseased souls flowing in arrow-like currents and rolling in whirlpools of flying discs, rapidly gliding with the pebbles and stones flung in the air from the slings. The sky has become like a lake of lotuses with lotus form heads of warriors flung aloft in the air while flying weapons are floating like their stalks with the broken swords all around like their thorns. Flying fragments of flags from the skins of the plants and the darts sticking to them appear like big black bees fluttering about the floor, moving with the breeze. Arrows sticking to the dead bodies of elephants are like ants on mountain tops and like timid girls clinging to men's bosoms. Winds unfurling the curling locks of supernatural Vidyadhar females indicate their approaching Jupiters. Like in an augury, the unfolding plumage of falls predict success. Lifted umbrellas shine like so many moons on high, and the moon itself shining above in the form of fair fame, spreads her light like a white canopy over the earth. The brave warrior, soon after his death, assumes a celestial form framed by his own merit, just like a man in his sleep attains the state he imagined to himself in his waking. Flying spears, lances, clubs, and discs are hurling in the air like shoals of restless fish and sharks moving about constantly in the troubled water of the sea. Milk white rags of umbrellas, tattered and shattered by arrow shafts, fly like cranes in the crowded air, appearing like the disk of the moon broken into a thousand pieces. Fans flying in the air with a hoarse, gurgling seem like waves of the sea lifted in the air, undulating with a babbling noise in the ocean of the sky. Those scraps of fans and umbrellas, gripped by slashing weapons, appear like the laurels of glory, flung aloft and flying in the regions of air. Look, O friend, how these flying arrows and shouting spears are approaching us with the hits of their spoil, like bodies of locusts bearing away their green beauty in the air. Listen to the clanking sound of steel striking by the uplifted arm of an armored soldier, resounding like the loud alarm of the king of death. Hear the tremendous blows of weapons, like the fury of an all-destroying tornado, throwing down mountain like elephants, their great ivory tusks lying on the ground like waterfalls. Look, there the chariot drivers are stopped in their course, struggling to make their way through puddles of blood in which wheels and horses are stuck together, like a bog of quagmire. The jingling of arms and the armor and the jangling of swords and steel sound like a lute playing for the dancing of the dire and dreaded dame of death. See, the skirts of the sky are reddened by the red particles borne by the winds from streams of blood, flowing out of the wounds in the bodies of men, horses, and elephants lying dead in the field. Look at the array of arrows in the air in the shape of a wreath of blossoms falling like lightning from dark black clouds of weapons hanging on high. See the surface of the earth filled with blood-red weapons appearing like faggots of fire strewn over the ground in a universal conflagration. A multitude of weapons mingle together, clashing and breaking one another into pieces, falling down in the showers like the innumerable rays of the sun. The fighting of one man among the motionless men is like the play of a magician acting his part for a British audience. See, their indifferent spectators are viewing the battle as a dream, the field of the battle, where all other sounds are hushed under the clashing of arms, resembles the stage of the martial god Bhairava chanting his pitiless war song in jarring cacophony. The battlefield is turned into a sea of blood filled with the sands of pounded weapons and rolling with the waves of broken discusses. The sky is filled with martial music, loudly sounding on all sides. Echoes of the hills seem to challenge one another in their aerial flight and fighting. Alas, for shame, says one, that these arrows, flung with such force from bowstrings, flying with such loud hissing, glittering like red-hot lightning, are foiled in their aim of piercing impenetrable armor and glance of hitting stony hills. Hear me, friend, you are tired of the sight. It is time for us to leave this place before our bodies are pierced by their sharp arrows, flashing like fire, and before the day runs its course into the evening. With this, chapter 34 ends, and in the chapter 25, again the battle description of the battlefield is there. So she said, then waves of cavalry mounting to the sky made the battlefield appear like a raging sea. Moving umbrellas floated as its foam and froth, and feathered silvery arrows glided like finny pearly fish, while cavalry charges and flights heaved and dashed like surges of the sea. Rushing of weapons resembled the running of its currents, and circles of soldiers were its whirlpools. The elephants were like its islets, and their motion resembled the rock moving. Whirling discs were its eddies, and long hair flying on heads its floating leaves. Sparkling sands were its shining waters, and the flash of swords its glassy spray. Gigantic barriers were its whales and alligators, and the resounding caves like its gurgling whirlpools. Flying arrows were its swimming fishes, and floating flags resembled its uprising waves and bows. Shining weapons formed the waters of this ocean, and their whirlpools also, while the long lines of horses appeared like the huge and horrible bodies of its whales. Soldiers clad in black iron armor were like the dark blue waters of the deep, and headless bodies groveling in dust were like the whirling currents of the sea, with the scattered weapons like seaweeds. Showers of arrows hit the sky with a mist, and the confused rattling of the battlefield was like the roaring of clouds. Flying and falling heads of slain soldiers resembled large drops of rain, and their bodies were like pieces of wood whirling in the eddies of the disk. The bold archer, bending his strong bow in the form of a curve and leaping above the ground, resembled the spouting of the sea rising from under the ground and heaving waves. The unnumbered umbrellas and flags that were moving up and down the field were like the foaming and frothing of the sea, rolling in waves of blood and carrying away the beams and timbers of broken chariots in its current. The army's march resembled the flow of sea water, and the blood spouting from the wounds of elephants were like its bubbles, while the moving horses and elephants represented the sea animals in their motion. The battlefield had become like a wonderful field of the air in which the furious war, like a tremendous earthquake, shook hills like moving clouds in the sky. Here the waves were undulating like flights of birds in the air, and groups of elephants falling aground like rocks, and the cowardly ranks murmured their herds of frightening deer. The field has become a forest of arrows. Wounded shoulders are standing fixed on the ground like trees, arrows flying like locusts, and horses moving like antelopes. Here, a loud drum sounded like the humming of bees in the hollows of trees. The army appears like a mist, with a bold warrior sprawling like a lion in it. Dust was rising in clouds, and horses falling like rocks. Huge broken chariots looked like hills, and flaming swords shine on all sides. The rise and fall of soldiers, each flitted like falling flowers on the ground, and flags and umbrellas rose above it like clouds. All was covered with streams of blood, and high-sounding elephants fell like thundering showers of rain. The war was like last doom of death ready to devour the world, destroying flags, banners, umbrellas, and chariots in a confused chaos. Shining weapons fell like fragments of the bright sun, burning all things like a burning flame inflames the soul and mind. The stretched bows were like rainbows, and falling arrows like showers of rain. Flying sabers resembled fog lightning, and their falling fragments like sparkling hailstones. The dire massacre made a sea of blood with hurling stones as it shoals and rocks. Flying arms resembled stars falling from heaven. The sky was like a sea full of whirlpools of discs hurled through the air. There were burning fires performing funerals of the slain. Missiles were like bolts of thunder that struck rock like elephants dead in the field to block the passage of man. Earth and sky were hidden by a thick cloud of showering arrows, and the army below was a sea of tempestuous warfare and bloodshed. Destructive weapons were flying on all sides, like huge dragons of the sea carried aloft by gusts of wind from the stormy wind. The flying arms of bows, swords, discs, pikes, and lances were blazing and breaking one another in the air with such hideous noise that it seemed to be a second deluge. When the last tornado blew up everything on high, scattering them in all directions, crushing and smashing them with a tremendous speed. With this chapter 35 also ends. In chapter 36, the battle, duels between equals, and catalogue of forces is described. Vasishtha is speaking. Heaps of arrows rising in spires above the ground drove the cowards and the wounded far away from the battlefield. Hills of dead bodies of men, horses, and elephants, having heaving in promiscuous heaps and appearing like clouds fallen upon earth. He invited the demon Yaksh, Rakshas, and carnivorous Pishad to come and play in the wide ocean of blood. Now there commenced a contest between men of equal rank and virtue among those of good character, valor, and strength on both sides. All took part in the combat, even holy householders. They fought duels like one cloud clashing with another, and like the confluence of two streams, discharging their fury against each other. As a rib is joined to another, one side with the other, so met horse against the horse and elephant against elephant in mutual conflict, as one forest clasps and clings to another, and as one hill is linked with another in a range, so the duelists struggled with each other like one wave dashing against the other. Footmen fought footmen like reeds crush reeds, and bamboo strikes each other in swirling winds. Chariots fell upon chariots and broke each other into pieces. Citizens beat rustics like the gods smote the demons of God. The sky, which had been clouded by flights of arrows, was now emblazoned by the Arcos banner resembling a rainbow of various colors. At last, the warriors who were overpowered in their conflict fled from the field as people do from a fire. Now, armor bearers with discus met in contest with those who shielded against discus. Archers opposed archers, and swordsmen challenged the other side's sword fighters. So, hookers and crookers challenged their co-rivals and crowbars in hand. Maces were opposed to maces, and lancers were set against the lance bearers in fighting. Spearmen braved spearmen, and the throwers of missiles were crossed with missiles in hand. Mallets fought against mallets, and clubs were opposed by clubmen in the conflict. Combatants with pikes encountered pikemen face to face, and iron rods were crossed in strife against pointed tridents. Fighters with missile weapons counteracted the missiles of their enemies, and those fighting with battle axes resisted the pole axes and pickaxes of their foes. Trappers with their traps and snares attacked the darters of nooses and lassos. Those who threw javelins withstood the javelins of the throwers on the other side. Daggers opposed daggers, and cudgels fought cudgels. Combatants with iron gloves opposed boxers with iron fist cuffs, and those with the iron cranes in hands pursued fighters with true swords. Warriors and plowshares attacked ploughmen, and those with tridents fell upon the opposing trident holders. Champions with chained armor sat upon soldiers attired in mail. They poured on the battlefield like flights of locusts or like the waves in the troubled sea. The air also appeared like a sea with flying discs, whirling like whirlpools, and the flight of reeds, whistling like gusts of wind. Various flying weapons seemed like sharks and dolphins moving about it. The sky of the heaven became the great deep of the sea, impassable by celestials, owing to the waves of weapons moving like monsters in the air. Thus the armies of the two belligerent rulers, each composed of 8 divisions as described below, furiously engaged one another. Now hear me relate to you the forces of the side of Padma, now named King Vidurat, and the allied powers that came to the side from the central and eastern districts. There came the hardy warriors of Kosal and Benares, those of Magad and Utkal, situated in the east, and the Mekhalas of Vindhya region, and Karkars of Carnatic, and the Madras in the south. The chiefs of Hema and Rudras, and the Tamil from the south, and the Pragjyotishas, and the horse-faced Osmaks, and Ambastha cannibals. Then there joined the Varnakoshtas and Visvotras, and the eaters of raw food and flesh, and fish eaters, and those with faces like tigers, the Kiratas with the Soviras and one-legged people. Next came the mountaineers of Malyavan, Sivira, and Anjanagiri, and others having the ensigns of bulls and lotuses. and the people of the sun rising mountain in the east. Those that join from the southeast are following, namely the Vindhyaris, the Chedis, the Vastas, the Dasarnas, Dasarnas, and the Angas, Bangas, and Upbangas, the upper and lower Bengal. They that met from the south were Kalingas and Kundras and Jatras, Vidarbhas and hill people, Sabras and the outcast tribals, the Karnas and the Tripura people. Those named Karnatakas from their thorny district, the unlighted Komalas, the Canaries, the Andhras, the Cholas, and the people on the borders of the Charmanavati river, the Caicos or bald-headed and the bearded people, and those of the Hemakuta hills, the frizzled and long-necked people, and the inhabitant of Kishkinda and Cocoa first. The princes that joined with Leela's husband from the south were as follows: the Vindhyas, the Kusumians of Patna, Mahindras and Darduras, the Malays and the Solar Race, and the prince of 33 United States, and the rich and united cities of Avanti and Sambhavati, and those of Daspura of Katha, Chakra, Rishika, Kutch, and others, and the foresters of Upgiri and Bhadragiri hills, the prince of Nagaur and the chiefs of Dandak forest, and the joint states of the people, the Sahas, Sevas, and the hill people of the Rishyamukha and Karkota and the Vimbila foresters. Then came the inhabitants from the banks of Pampa, the Caracas and the Karkaviras and the Kherikas, Asikas, and the people of Dhrumpattana. Next came the Kasikas and Khallukas, the Yadas and Tamraparinikas, the Gonardas, the Kanakas, and the people of Dinapattam, the Tamils, Kadambaras, Sahakaras, and deer hunters, the Betundas, Tumbavalas, and those attired in deer and elephant skins. Then came the lotus-like seas and Konkans and the inhabitants of Chitrakoot mountains with the people of Karnata, the Mantas, Batakas, and those of Cuttack. The Andhras and Pole hill people, the Avantis and Cheris, and with the Chandas and Devnakas and Karunkas, Vahas. At last came the people from three peaks of Chitrakoot mountains called Shilakra, Nanda, Mardana, and Malaya, which were the seats of the guardian Dhakshas of Lanka. Then those of the southwest, where there is the great realm of Surat, with the kingdoms of the Sindh, Sovira, Abhira, and Dravidas. Also, those of the districts of Kikata, Siddhakhanda, and Kaliduha, the Mount Himagiri or Golden Hills, and the Ravataka range. Then the warriors of Jaya Kacha and Mewar, and also the Yavanas, the Behlikas, and Marganas, nomads, and the grey colored Tumbas. Then there came Lhasa races and many hill people inhabiting the borders of the sea, forming the limit of the dominion of Leela's husband on the north. Now know the names of the countries belonging to the enemy in the west, and of those composed of the following mountain ranges, namely Mount Maniman and the Kururpana hills, with the hillocks of Venorka, Meghbhav, and Chakravan mountain. There is the country of the five peoples limiting the territory of the Kasa Brahmins, and after the Bharaksha, the Parak, the Santika countries. Hence stretch the countries of the Savyas, Amarkas, the Paschatyas, and Bhutvas, and then Haya country and those of the Suryas, Gayas, and Tajikas and Hunas. Then, along the side of other countries, there is the range of Karka hills, inhabited by barbarous people devoid of caste, customs, and limits of moral duties. Then stretches a country hundreds of leagues in length to the boundary mountain of Mahendra, abounding in rich stones and gems. After that stands the Ashwa range with hundreds of hills about it and extending to the great ocean on the north of the Pariyatra range. On the northwestern side, there are countries beyond the boundary mountains where Venupati was the king of the land. Then there are the countries of Falgunas and Mandavyas and many other people, and those of Kurukunda and Paras as bright as the orb of the sun. Then the races of Vanmilas, Nalinas, and Dirghas, who are so called from their tall statures and long arms and hairs. Then there are the Rangas, Stanikas with protuberant band breasts, and the Guruhas and Chaluhas. After that is the kingdom of women, where they feed upon bullocks and heifers. Now about the Himalayas and its hills in the north, these are the Karuncha and Madhuban hills and the Kailas, Vasuman and Sumeru peaks, at the foot of which are the people known under many names. Beside these, there met the warlike tribes of India consisting the Mandravars, Malavas and Surasenas, the Rajputs of the race of Arjuna, the Trigartas and the one-legged people of the Khudras. There were the Abalas, Parakhalas and the Sakas, the Khem, Madhurat, Madhurtas, the Dasdhanas, the Gavasanas and club fighters, the Dhandas and Sarakas and Bhathanas, also with the islanders and Gandharas and Avanti warriors of Malwa, the warlike Taksilas and Bilavas, Bodhanas and the renowned warriors of Pushkar. Then there were the Tikshas and Kalavaras and the inhabitants of the cities of Kahaka and Subharti, Surabhuti likewise. There were the people of the Ratikardasa and Antardarsa, also the Pinglas, the Pandyas, Yamanas, and Yatudhanas, demons too. There were also the races of men known as Hemtals and Osmats, together with the hilly tribes inhabiting the Himalaya, Vasuman, Orancha, and Kailas mountains. Here we now relate to you the people that came from the northeast quarter, which extends 180 leagues in its circumference. There all came also the Kalutas and Brahmaputras, the Kunidas and Kudinas, with the warlike Malwas and the champions of the Randhara and forest states. Then there were the Kedwas and Sinnaputras of dwarfish statures, the Sabas, the Kekas, and the Pahlavis, and the Kamiras, and the Daradas. There were also the people of Abish, Jarvaks, and Kulolas, and Kuvils, the Kirtas, the the Yamupatas, together with the poor and rich people of desert lands and tracts of gold. Thus, Leela in one vision saw the homes of the gods and the forest lands and the earth in all their beauty. She saw all the seats of opulence and the buildings with which they were adorned. She saw the summit of Kailash and the delightful groves at its foot, and the level lands traversed by the aerial cars of Vidyadhara and other celestial beings. With this, chapter 36 ends, but the battle is still continuing, and we will keep taking it in the next chapters by the grace of Lord Ram. Until then, Shivam will meet tomorrow by the grace of Lord.